The tension in the CNN debate studio was thick enough to cut with a knife. Under the blazing studio lights, two of America's most controversial political figures sat across from each other, ready for what would become the most shocking political confrontation of 2025. Karoline Leavitt, the 27-year-old former White House press secretary turned congressional candidate, sat confidently in her signature navy blazer, blonde hair perfectly styled, eyes sharp with the kind of ambition that had made her Trump's youngest spokesperson. Across from her, Kash Patel, the 45-year-old former FBI director nominee and son of Indian immigrants, adjusted his tie with the calm precision of a man who had spent years in the intelligence community. What happened in the next 30 seconds would send shock waves across America and change both of their political careers forever. Mr. Patel, Leavitt began, her voice carrying that familiar edge that had made her famous during White House briefings. Maybe it's time you stopped pretending to understand American values and went back to India where you belong. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. The studio audience gasped. CNN anchor Anderson Cooper's eyes widened in disbelief. Social media would later call it the most racist comment ever made on live television by a major political figure, but Kash Patel's response, nobody saw it coming. What he said next didn't just destroy Leavitt's political career. It exposed a truth about America that left the entire nation speechless. Before we dive into this incredible story, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of the explosive political drama we cover. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. This wasn't just another political debate. This was the moment when America's ugly truths collided with its highest ideals live on national television. And by the end of this confrontation, one career would be over, one would be transformed, and the entire country would be talking about what it really means to be American. To understand how we got to this explosive moment, you need to know who these two people really are and why this debate mattered so much to America's future. At just 27, Karoline Leavitt had already conquered political heights that most people never reach in their entire careers. Born and raised in New Hampshire, she came from a working-class Catholic family that taught her the value of hard work and conservative principles. After graduating from St. Anselm College, she landed a job in Trump's White House communications team when she was barely 24 years old. Leavitt quickly made a name for herself as one of Trump's most fierce defenders. Her youth, combined with her sharp tongue and unwavering loyalty, made her a media darling among conservatives. When Trump needed someone who could handle hostile press conferences and never back down from a fight, he chose Leavitt as the youngest White House press secretary in American history. But Leavitt's rise wasn't without controversy. Critics called her Trump's attack dog, pointing to her history of inflammatory statements and her willingness to say whatever it took to defend her boss. Her supporters saw her as a breath of fresh air, a young woman who wasn't afraid to stand up to the liberal media establishment. After leaving the White House, Leavitt set her sights on Congress, running for New Hampshire's 1st District on a platform of America First policies and traditional values. She positioned herself as the future of the conservative movement, the one who would carry Trump's torch into the next generation. Kash Patel's story was quintessentially American, even though Leavitt would try to use it against him. Born to parents who immigrated from India in the 1970s, Patel grew up in New York, watching his father work multiple jobs to provide for his family. His parents had come to America with nothing but dreams and a work ethic that would make their son proud. Patel excelled in school, earning a law degree and eventually working his way up through the Department of Justice. He served as a prosecutor going after terrorists and drug cartels, putting his life on the line for his adopted country. When Trump came to power, Patel became one of his most trusted advisors on national security matters. As a senior official in the Trump administration, Patel was known for his intelligence, his loyalty, and his ability to get things done. He played key roles in counterterrorism operations and was instrumental in exposing what Trump called the deep state conspiracy against his presidency. Trump trusted Patel so much that he nominated him to lead the FBI, though the nomination faced fierce opposition from Democrats who saw him as too loyal to Trump. Unlike many politicians, Patel had actually put his life on the line for America. He had worked undercover operations, had been threatened by terrorists, and had spent years in the intelligence community protecting American lives. His record of service was impeccable, but to some, his Indian heritage made him an easy target. This CNN debate wasn't just about two political careers. It was happening at a crucial moment in American politics when questions about immigration identity and what it means to be truly American were dividing the country. Leavitt represented a wing of the conservative movement that believed America was losing its identity. She spoke for millions of Americans who felt that their country was changing too fast, that traditional values were under attack, and that only people with deep American roots could truly understand what the country needed. Patel represented something different, the American dream in action. He was proof that immigrants could become some of America's most dedicated patriots. That love of country wasn't determined by how many generations your family had been here, but by your willingness to serve and sacrifice for American ideals. The Shine debate was supposed to focus on national security policy, an area where both had expertise. Leavitt had been Trump's spokesperson during major international crises, while Patel had actually been in the room making life and death decisions about America's safety. But as the cameras rolled and the questions began, it became clear that this would be about much more than policy. This would be about the soul of America itself. CNN had built it as the future of conservative politics, featuring two rising stars who represented different visions for where the Republican Party should go. The network expected fireworks, but nobody anticipated what was about to happen. The stage was set. Two ambitious politicians, each representing a different vision of America, sitting across from each other under the brightest lights in the country. One would walk away victorious, the other would have their career destroyed by their own words. What happened next would force America to confront some uncomfortable truths about itself. The debate started normally enough. Anderson Cooper, CNN veteran anchor, opened with questions about border security and national defense, safe territory for both candidates. For the first 20 minutes, Leavitt and Patel traded policy positions like seasoned professionals. Leavitt advocated for strict immigration controls and accused the Biden administration of weakening America's borders. "We need leaders who understand that America must come first," she said, her voice confident and clear. "Our citizens deserve to know that their government is working for them, not for people who have no right to be here." Patel responded with his typical measured tone, outlining specific policies while drawing on his experience in law enforcement. "I've spent my career actually catching the bad guys," he said calmly. "I've worked undercover to stop drug cartels and terrorists. I know the difference between real threats and political talking points." The first sign of trouble came when Cooper asked about the Trump administration's immigration policies. Leavitt immediately went on the attack, suggesting that some Trump officials hadn't been tough enough on immigration enforcement. "We need people in government who truly understand American values," Leavitt said, her eyes flashing toward Patel. "People whose loyalty to this country can never be questioned." Patel raised an eyebrow but maintained his composure. "I think my record speaks for itself," he replied. I've risked my life for this country more than once. I've put terrorists in prison and helped keep Americans safe. If that's not loyalty, I don't know what is." But Leavitt wasn't backing down. She had come to this debate with a strategy, and she was determined to execute it regardless of the consequences. "It's easy to claim loyalty," she shot back, "but real Americans don't need to prove their patriotism. It's in their blood." The phrase "real Americans" hung in the air like a warning shot. Cooper shifted uncomfortably in his chair, sensing that the debate was heading into dangerous territory. In the control room, CNN producers began to worry about where this was going. Patel's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained steady. "Miss Leavitt, I hope you're not suggesting that American citizenship is determined by ancestry rather than values and service." "I am suggesting," Leavitt replied, her voice getting sharper, "that some people understand America instinctively while others have to learn it from books." The audience in the studio began to murmur. This was getting personal, and everyone could feel it. On social media, viewers were already starting to take sides, with hashtags like "Warner Real Americans" and "Immigrant Pride" beginning to trend. Cooper tried to steer the conversation back to policy, asking about specific border security measures, but Leavitt had tasted blood, and she wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. She had clearly decided that the best way to defeat Patel was to question his fundamental right to speak for America. "Mr. Patel talks a good game about American values," she continued, "but when push comes to shove, where do his loyalties really lie? When he looks in the mirror, does he see an American or does he see something else?" The studio fell silent. This was no longer a policy debate. This was a direct attack on Patel's identity and belonging in America. Cooper looked stunned, clearly struggling with whether to intervene or let this play out. Patel's supporters watching at home felt their hearts sink. They had seen this before, the subtle and not so subtle suggestions that Americans with immigrant backgrounds could never be real Americans, no matter how much they achieved or sacrificed. But Patel himself remained calm, almost eerily so. He looked directly at Leavitt with the kind of steady gaze that had intimidated terrorists in interrogation rooms. "Ms. Leavitt," he said quietly, "I think you should be very careful about the road you're going down." Leavitt either didn't hear the warning in his voice or chose to ignore it. She had committed to this strategy, and she was going to see it through to the end. "Mr. Patel, you've served in government, and I respect that. But there's a difference between serving America and truly understanding America. Some of us were born with that understanding. Others," she paused dramatically, "others will always be trying to prove they belong." The insult was clear, even if the words were carefully chosen. It was suggesting that Patel, despite his years of service and sacrifice, could never be a real American because of his immigrant background. Patel nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting this moment all along. "I see," he said calmly. "So you believe that American identity is determined by ancestry rather than actions. That's an interesting position for someone who claims to support constitutional values." "I believe," Leavitt replied, her voice rising, "that America should be led by Americans who don't need to prove their loyalty because it's never been in question." The crowd was getting restless now. Some people were cheering Leavitt's boldness, while others were clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Cooper was frantically getting instructions through his earpiece with CNN executives, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this explosive moment continue. That's when Patel did something unexpected. Instead of getting angry or defensive, he smiled. It was a calm, confident smile that suggested he knew something that nobody else in the room knew. "Miss Leavitt," he said, his voice taking on a different tone, "since you want to talk about who really belongs in America, let me tell you a story. It's about my family and it's about yours. And by the time I'm done, I think everyone watching will understand exactly who deserves to question whose loyalty to this country. Leavitt's confidence faltered for just a moment. Something in Patel's tone suggested that he wasn't about to roll over and take her attacks. In fact, it sounded like he had been preparing for this moment his entire career. You see, Patel continued, his voice growing stronger, I've spent years in the intelligence community. I know how to research people. I know how to find information. And before I came here tonight, I did a little research on you, Miss Leavitt. What I found was very, very interesting. The studio fell completely silent. Even the camera operators stopped moving. Everyone sensed that something big was about to happen. Leavitt's face had gone pale. She clearly hadn't expected Patel to fight back with information of his own. I don't know what you think you found, she said, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. Patel's smile widened. Oh, I think you know exactly what I found, but don't worry, I'm going to share it with everyone. And that's when Kash Patel dropped a bombshell that would change everything. Kash Patel leaned forward in his chair, his hands folded calmly in front of him. The studio lights seemed to focus on him as he prepared to deliver what would become one of the most devastating political comebacks in American history. Miss Leavitt, he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years briefing presidents and hunting terrorists. You just told me to go back to India. You suggested that I'm not a real American. You questioned my loyalty to this country. He paused, letting the weight of her words sink in with the audience. But before we talk about who belongs in America, let me share some facts with the American people. Facts that I think they deserve to know. Leavitt shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The confidence she had shown just moments earlier was evaporating as she realized that Patel wasn't going to simply absorb her attack. You see, Patel continued, when you work in intelligence, you learn to verify everything. So when I heard that I would be debating Karoline Leavitt tonight, I did what any good investigator would do. I checked the facts about both of our families. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. This is public information available to anyone who cares to look, but I suspect most Americans don't know the real story of the Leavitt family history. The cameras zoomed in on the folder as Patel opened it deliberately. CNN producers were frantically trying to decide whether to intervene, but ratings were skyrocketing as viewers across the country sensed they were witnessing something historic. Let's start with my family, Patel said calmly. My parents came to America in 1970 with nothing but hope and determination. My father worked 3 jobs as a taxi driver during the day, a security guard at night, and a janitor on weekends. My mother cleaned office buildings and took care of other people's children. His voice remained steady, but there was emotion behind it. They didn't come here for government handouts or special treatment. They came here because they believed in American dream, the idea that if you work hard and follow the rules, you can build a better life for your children. He looked directly at Leavitt. My father never took a penny of welfare, never asked for special treatment, never expected America to owe him anything. He just worked and saved and sent me to school with the money he earned with his own hands. The studio was completely silent now. Even Leavitt's supporters were listening intently. When I was old enough to serve my country, Patel continued, I didn't hesitate. I became a prosecutor, putting criminals in prison. I worked undercover to catch drug dealers and terrorists. I risked my life in operations that I still can't talk about because they're classified. He paused, his eyes never leaving Leavitt's face. I've been shot at by terrorists. I've been threatened by drug cartels. I've spent nights in foreign countries where being discovered would have meant death. All to protect American lives. The emotion in his voice was growing stronger. Now, so when MS Leavitt questions my loyalty to America, when she tells me to go back to India, she's not just insulting me. She's insulting every immigrant family that has ever sacrificed for this country. She's insulting every American whose parents came here seeking a better life. Applause began to ripple through parts of the audience, but Patel held up his hand. But I'm not done yet, because the really interesting part isn't my family's story. It's hers. Leavitt's face went white. She clearly hadn't expected this. Patel opened the folder and pulled out several documents. You see, MS Leavitt loves to talk about being a real American whose family has deep roots in this country. She's built her entire political identity around the idea that she represents authentic American values. He held up the first document, but according to public records, the Leavitt family immigrated to America in 1892. That's right, Karoline Leavitt is a third-generation immigrant, just like millions of other Americans. The audience began to murmur. This wasn't what anyone had expected. But here's where it gets really interesting, Patel continued, his voice taking on the tone of a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. The Leavitt family came here from, wait for it, Canada. He paused for effect. That's right, folks. The woman who just told me to go back to India is herself the descendant of Canadian immigrants who came to America looking for economic opportunities. The murmuring in the audience grew louder. Some people began to laugh at the irony. But wait, there's more, Patel said, clearly enjoying himself now. According to immigration records, Karoline's great-grandfather, Thomas Leavitt, was actually refused entry to the United States twice before finally being admitted on his third attempt. Leavitt tried to interrupt. This is ridiculous. You can't compare. Oh, but I can. Patel cut her off smoothly, because you see, Thomas Leavitt was rejected because immigration officials were concerned about his ability to support himself in America. He had no money, no job prospects, and no guarantees. He looked directly at the camera. In other words, Thomas Leavitt was exactly the kind of immigrant that his great-granddaughter now wants to keep out of America. The audience erupted. Some people were cheering, others were laughing, and a few were clearly uncomfortable with this turn of events. Patel wasn't finished, but here's my favorite part of the Leavitt family story. Thomas Leavitt's immigration petition was actually sponsored by an Indian-American businessman who had made his fortune in the textile industry. The studio fell silent again as the full impact of this revelation sank in. That's right, Patel said, his voice rising now. Karoline Leavitt's family was only able to come to America because an Indian immigrant vouched for them and helped them get established. He turned to face Leavitt directly. So when you tell me to go back to India, you're literally telling the descendant of the people who helped your family come to America to leave the country that we both call home. The irony was so perfect, so complete, that even some of Leavitt's supporters in the audience began to shake their heads in disbelief. But Patel wasn't done delivering his knockout punch. Mivat, he said, his voice now carrying the full authority of his years in law enforcement. You want to talk about real Americans. Let me tell you what real Americans do. He stood up, his presence commanding the entire studio. Real Americans don't judge people by the color of their skin or the country their grandparents came from. Real Americans judge people by their character, their actions, and their service to others. His voice was rising with passion. Now, real Americans don't tell other Americans to go back where they came from, especially when their own families came from somewhere else, too. He pointed directly at Leavitt. Real Americans don't build their careers on dividing people and spreading hate. Real Americans build their careers on bringing people together and serving their country. The audience was on its feet now, many people applauding loudly. Even some of the camera operators were nodding in agreement. You want to know the difference between us, Miss Leavitt? Patel asked, his voice now thundering through the studio. My family came to America with nothing and gave everything to this country. Your family came to America with nothing and apparently taught their descendants to look down on other people who did the same thing. He paused, letting his words sink in. I've spent my entire adult life serving America as a prosecutor, as an intelligence officer, as a public servant. You've spent your career serving Donald Trump and your own political ambitions. The contrast was stark and devastating. So before you ever again question anyone's loyalty to America, Patel concluded, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried throughout the entire studio, you might want to look in the mirror and ask yourself what you've actually done to make this country better. He sat back down, folded his hands, and looked calmly at Anderson Cooper. I believe you had a question about border security. The studio erupted in applause. Even some of the CNN crew were clapping. Leavitt sat in her chair, her face red with embarrassment and anger, clearly unable to formulate a response to the devastating takedown she had just received. Cooper, professional that he was, tried to restore order to the debate, but everyone knew that the real drama was over. Kash Patel had just delivered one of the most perfect political comebacks in American history, using its own family history to expose the hypocrisy of her attack. As the applause finally died down, Patel looked directly into the camera and said, America is great because we welcome people who want to work hard and contribute to our society, regardless of where they came from. That's what makes us different from every other country in the world. And anyone who tries to divide us based on our origins doesn't understand what America is really about. The message was clear, powerful, and undeniably American. And in that moment, Kash Patel didn't just win a debate. He reminded the entire country what it really means to be American. The immediate aftermath of Kash Patel's devastating response was unlike anything CNN had ever experienced. Within seconds of his final statement, social media exploded in a way that political observers had never seen before. Before Anderson Cooper could even wrap up the debate, Minimum Cash Destroys Karoline was trending #1 on Twitter. The video clip of Patel's response was being shared faster than the platform's servers could process it. Conservative commentator Ben Shapiro, who rarely praised anyone outside his own ideological circle, tweeted, "Holy, I've never seen a more perfect political takedown in my life." Kash Patel just schooled everyone on what American values actually mean. Liberal commentator Van Jones, usually a harsh critic of Trump-associated figures, posted, "I disagreed with Patel on policy, but what he just did was pure American greatness. Sometimes truth transcends politics." The memes started flowing immediately. The most popular showed a photo of Patel calmly sitting with his folder while Leavitt looked panicked, captioned, "When you come to a fact fight with talking points." Another showed the Statue of Liberty giving a thumbs up with the text, "Immigrants schooling racists since 1886. But the most powerful posts weren't memes, they were personal stories. Thousands of Americans began sharing their own immigration stories. Many starting with my family came here from, followed by tales of sacrifice, hard work, and love of country. The political implications were immediate and far-reaching. Within hours, major Republican figures were forced to choose sides in a way that revealed deep fractures within the conservative movement. Senator Ted Cruz, himself the son of an immigrant, tweeted, "Kash Patel just reminded us all what conservative values really mean. Character matters more than ancestry. Service matters more than heritage." Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, clearly trying to navigate the controversy carefully, posted, "America has always been strengthened by legal immigrants who embrace our values and contribute to our society." But perhaps the most surprising response came from Donald Trump himself. Known for his loyalty to his former staff, Trump found himself in an impossible position. Leavitt had been one of his most faithful defenders, but Patel had also been a trusted advisor. Trump's response, posted to Truth Social 3 hours after the debate, was characteristically unpredictable. "Kash Patel is a great American and a true patriot. He served our administration with honor and distinction. Some people need to learn the difference between America first and America only. We welcome legal immigrants who love our country. The statement was widely interpreted as Trump throwing Leavitt under the bus while embracing Patel, a stunning reversal for someone who usually stood by his people no matter what. Major news outlets struggled to process what they had witnessed. Fox News, usually friendly to Trump-aligned figures like Leavitt, found themselves in an awkward position. Tucker Carlson, often criticized for his own comments about immigration, surprised everyone with his response on his show the next night. What Kash Patel did last night wasn't just good television, Carlson said. It was a masterclass in American values. When someone attacks you for your background, you don't respond with anger. You respond with facts, with service, and with dignity. That's what winners do. CNN ratings for the debate broke records, becoming the most watched political program in the network's history. Anderson Cooper, reflecting on the moment during the next day's broadcast, said, "In 30 years of journalism, I've never seen anything like what Kash Patel did last night. He turned what could have been a moment of division into a lesson in what unites us as Americans. Even international media took notice." The BBC headline read, "American debate shows how immigrants often understand democracy better than native-born citizens." The Times of India proudly proclaimed, "Indian American shows America how to win with dignity." For Karoline Leavitt, the aftermath was a political disaster of epic proportions. By the morning after the debate, 3 major donors had pulled their support from her congressional campaign. Her campaign manager resigned, citing fundamental disagreements about strategy and messaging. The New Hampshire Republican Party, which had previously endorsed her candidacy, issued a carefully worded statement distancing themselves from her comments. The New Hampshire Republican Party believes that American values are not determined by ancestry, but by character and service to country. More damaging were the defections from her own staff. Her communications director, press secretary, and deputy campaign manager all resigned within 48 hours, with several citing their own immigrant backgrounds as factors in their decisions. Leavitt attempted damage control with a series of tweets and a hastily arranged press conference, but nothing could undo the damage. Her explanation that she had been taken out of context rang hollow when the entire exchange was available on video. "I never meant to suggest that Mr. Patel wasn't American," she claimed at her press conference. "I was simply trying to highlight the difference between those who understand American culture instinctively and those who have had to learn it." The explanation only made things worse as critics pointed out that she was still suggesting there were different levels of Americanness based on family history for Kash Patel. The debate transformed him from a respected but relatively unknown former government official into a national conservative hero. Speaking requests poured in from across the country. Book publishers reached out about autobiography deals. Political operatives began floating his name for higher office. But perhaps more importantly, Patel had achieved something rare in modern politics. He had managed to unite people across party lines around a shared vision of American values. His response to Leavitt was studied in political science classes as an example of how to respond to attacks with grace and effectiveness. Communications experts praised his use of facts, his emotional authenticity, and his ability to turn a negative moment into a positive message about America. The debate had implications far beyond the two participants. Patel's response forced a broader conversation about immigration and American identity that many politicians had been avoiding. Immigration advocacy groups seized on Patel's words as a perfect example of how immigrants often have a deeper appreciation for American values than those who take them for granted. Conservative groups found themselves in the unusual position of defending an immigration narrative that emphasized contribution over restriction. The debate also highlighted the complexity of modern American identity. Millions of Americans saw themselves in both Patel's story of immigrant success and Leavitt's appeal to traditional American values, forcing a more nuanced conversation about what it means to belong in America. In the months following the debate, political analysts identified it as a turning point in how conservatives talk about immigration and American identity. The old model of us versus them rhetoric became much more difficult to sustain when the them included people like Kash Patel, who had clearly sacrificed more for America than many of the people questioning their loyalty. Republican primary candidates across the country found themselves being asked the Patel question, how they would respond to attacks on the Americanness of legal immigrants who had served their country with distinction. The debate also marked the beginning of the end for Leavitt's political career. She would eventually withdraw from the congressional race, citing family considerations, though everyone understood that her candidacy had become untenable after the debate. Perhaps the most important outcome of the debate was the message it sent about American values in the 21st century. Patel's response reminded the country that America's strength had always come from its ability to welcome people who are willing to work hard and contribute to society, regardless of where they came from. His calm, factual response to a racist attack showed that the best way to combat division is not with anger or defensiveness, but with truth, dignity, and an unwavering commitment to the values that make America great. As one viral tweet put it, Kash Patel just showed America how to win an argument without losing your soul. The story of Kash Patel's triumph over Karoline Leavitt's attack became more than just a political moment. It became a template for how Americans should respond when faced with attempts to divide them based on ancestry or background. In the end, the debate proved that America's greatest strength isn't its military or its economy. It's its ability to create Americans out of people from anywhere in the world who are willing to embrace American values and contribute to American success. If this story inspired you like it inspired millions of Americans, make sure to hit that subscribe button and share this video with everyone you know. This is exactly the kind of political courage and American spirit that we need more of in our country. Let us know in the comments what you thought of Kash Patel's incredible response. And don't forget to check out our other videos about the real heroes who are fighting for America's future. The lesson was clear. In America, your worth isn't determined by where your grandparents came from. It's determined by what you're willing to do for the country you call home. And sometimes it takes an immigrant son to remind the rest of us what that really means.